Hello, welcome to Sophie & Co. I'm Sophie Shevardnadze. Greece may be out of the headlines for now, with a bailout package secured and austerity on track. But can the debt crisis see light at the end of the tunnel? Is the Eurozone turmoil going to cease? I'm joined by one of Germany's most prominent economists, president of IFO Institute for Economic Research and an advisor for the German Economic Ministry, Werner Sinn. Professor Werner Sinn is my guest today.
The pillar of European unity, the common currency of the continent, is being strained by the dragging financial crisis. With well-off members pouring billions into the debt pit of Europe's south, and austerity measures only bring in backlash from Brussels, how long can the Eurozone keep it up? And are further radical steps needed to secure its future?
President of IFO Institute for Economic Research, advisor for the German Economic Ministry, Professor Werner Sinn. Welcome to the show. It's really great to have you with us today, sir. So, Professor Sinn, you have said that the euro crisis is coming back and that the Eurozone can expect it to last for at least a decade. Is the single currency in its current state set to fade away?
No, I don't think so, and I don't hope so. But the crisis is certainly coming back. Greece has received funds for 3 years. I suspect that after 2.5 years, the same sort of discussion which we have had this year will return.
Now, you propose adopting a breathable euro where struggling nations can temporarily leave the single currency and then re-enter. How would that work? I mean, would they return to their own currencies for the time being?
Yes, indeed. The problem is Europe has not created the common state like the United States of America or Switzerland. And we still do have a common currency. This does not really fit very well together because some countries may have borrowed too much, and you cannot prevent them from doing that because we do not have enough central power. So then these countries become too expensive by borrowing. They increase their wages. They lose their competitiveness. And then they need help. And this help in the Eurozone is expensive if you have a transfer system. The alternative, the better alternative, is to temporarily exit, devalue, and then later, when the new exchange rate has found its equilibrium, you can return.
But how would that technically happen, though? I mean, once you exit the euro, how difficult would it be to come back to it?
The euro, in terms of banknotes, can stay in circulation. These banknotes create a debt of the state with regard to the euro system, and they can serve temporarily for cash payments. But most people use nowadays credit cards and make transfers from one bank account to another account. So that can be done overnight very easily. And then gradually, with the passage of time, say after a few months, new banknotes will be printed and they can then be used. But in the meantime, the old euro banknotes can be continued to be used.
Now, you've said that Greece should have exited the euro back in 2010 temporarily. Is that still an option today?
In the moment, not, because Greece has received its third rescue program, and that will be enough money for the next 2.5, 3 years. So there won't be a Greek exit for that period, I guess. We have the Maastricht Treaty. The Maastricht Treaty says there's no bailout. A country can go bankrupt if it has overborrowed. But then we would also need a possibility for this country to regain competitiveness, and this is the exit. Yanis Varoufakis, the finance minister of Greece, has prepared for such an exit. So it's not an absurd idea. In fact, it's the devaluation which has in the past always rescued economies that had lost their competitiveness.
Why fight so much for Greece to stay on board when obviously helping out Greece and bailing out Greece is causing so much rifts within the EU members, the founding EU members? What's such a big deal about letting Greece go?
You mean why they stay on board?
Yeah, why fight so much to keep Greece on board?
Well, from the Greek perspective, the advantage is they have access to the printing press. They can print euros, and that gives them a lot of flexibility. Otherwise, they would have to print drachmas, which are not accepted
but
outside
I'm asking
Greece
from the
as a
European
perspective.
perspective.
From the European perspective, I would say most of the countries were against it. 15 or 14 countries were for the exit, as Finance Minister Schäuble has said the other day. And only France, Greece and Cyprus and perhaps Italy, here I'm not sure, were in favor of keeping Greece in. Why in? Well, the French have invested a lot of money in Greece. The exposure is huge. They own banks in Greece. And France is afraid that if one country goes out of the euro, then the next country might do the same if it works well. And they seem to have an idea that a new political entity should be created out of the euro, which I'm not sure is the right thing to do for Europe, because it would also divide Europe in the middle. There are the Eastern European countries which to a large extent do not participate in the euro.
Yanis Varoufakis, that you've just mentioned, also called Greece an experiment for austerity. How long can it continue? Are the 344 billion euro loans worth it?
Austerity, experiment of austerity. Well, I'm not sure what he means. I think he means that austerity was imposed on him, on Greece, by the other countries of the Eurozone, which is not. Austerity was imposed by the markets. Greece overborrowed, lost its creditworthiness, and from 2008 onwards, they were unable to borrow. Then the other European countries came and helped. First, they allowed Greece to use their own printing press, so they borrowed through the ECB system. And then from 2010 onwards, there were the fiscal rescue credits. The overall amount of funds which Greece has received from international institutions like the IMF, like the EU, the other European countries, the ECB, was more than 350 billion euros. And this is 200% of its GDP. So it was everything but austerity. It was the biggest austerity mitigating program ever in history.
But I think what he meant is that 5 years on, the austerity measures haven't quite solved the Greek debt crisis, and the country is in economic shambles, and people are very angry. The country isn't any better off than 5 years ago, so why insist on it? I think that's what he meant. So why insist on it, Professor?
Yeah. Well, here we agree. I agree. The whole program has not worked. So one has given Greece lots of money, but money doesn't create competitiveness. To the contrary, the lack of competitiveness in Greece results from the fact that they overborrowed in the period when the euro brought them very low interest rates. The state borrowed to increase the wages faster than productivity. The private sector had to follow. The wage increase forced prices up, and Greece lost its competitiveness. And if you give such a country then ongoing credit from other countries, the wrong prices and wages are maintained, and the lack of competitiveness is preserved forever. So that's not a solution. The only solution for Greece would be there are the following solutions. First solution is we pay permanent transfers from the northern countries to Greece, say. But then others want that too. That can be expensive. The second possibility is they cut their prices. They inflated too much. Now the prices have to come down again. But that is more difficult than it seems, because you would drive creditors and debtors into bankruptcy, and also tenants who can't pay their rent anymore. So the third possibility is we inflate Germany. The ECB might be trying to do that with its QE program. Greece has increased its price level, other southern countries too. Germany follows up. They try that. If it works, we will see. I'm not sure. And if it doesn't work, the last possibility is the exit. And this is the logical consequence which Yanis Varoufakis was willing to draw, and which I would also be drawing.
So here's to another country. The president of Portugal has refused to let the left anti-austerity forces, who are in the majority in parliament, to form a government, fearing the backlash of Brussels. So following budget orders from EU creditors is more important than following democratic principles?
If Portugal wants to take it, they can take this money. If they don't want to take it, they don't take the money. So what is undemocratic about it? They can't say democracy requires to receive as much credit as we like from other countries. There are, after all, the taxpayers of other countries in Europe which provide the credit.
All right, Professor Sinn, we're going to take a very short break right now, and when we come back, we'll continue talking to Werner Sinn about the challenges the European Union is facing on a path to economic and political unity. Stay with us.
Do we speak your language? Want news, programs and documentaries in Spanish? What matters to you? Breaking news, alternative angles, hidden stories. Are you here? Then try RT Spanish. To find out more, visit actualidad.rt.com.
5 seconds. And over the mic is all fuel to go.
Did you know the press is the only industry specifically mentioned in the Constitution?
Stand by.
That's because a free and open press is critical to our democracy.
Track Alpha. Roll Alpha.
In fact, the single biggest threat facing our nation today is the corporate takeover of our government and our press.
Stand by, camera 1.
We've been hijacked by a handful of powerful transnational corporations that will profit by destroying what our founding fathers once built up. I'm Tom Hartman, and on this show, we reveal the big picture of what's actually going on in the world. We go beyond identifying the problem. We try to fix it. Rational debate and a real discussion of the critical issues facing America.
Stand by on camera, go.
Ready to join the movement? Then welcome to the big picture.
They're the war hawks selling you on the idea that dropping bombs brings peace, to the chicken hawks forcing you to fight in the battles that they've started.
The news hawks try to tell you that celebrity gossip and tabloid murder trials are the most important news of the day.
While the hawks of advertising tell you that you are not cool enough unless you buy their product.
Watching the hawks. Watching the hawks.
These are the hawks that we, along with our audience, will be watching.
The government thought their proposal for a merger was going to be a boom, but alas, it turned out to be a bust.
We're in exactly the same crisis, only the situation is more dire now than it has ever been.
The question then becomes, what happens when you have an economic downturn?
China has pledged to contribute a total of $41 billion to the bank.
Beijing has to keep it going.
Some fundraisers are predicting the next election could cost $5 billion.
Since the end of the Cold War a quarter of a century ago, the global security order has been dangerously out of balance. During this time, the U.S. has been able to unilaterally dictate its unipolar agenda. Today, American hegemony is in question and in decline.
We're back with Werner Sinn, leading German economist, president of IFO Institute for Economic Research, discussing the issues standing in the way of European unity. Now, Professor, you advocate a united Europe with a common government, parliament and armies. What does it mean? Do you propose merging 27 countries into one? Walk us through it.
Yes, actually I do. I think a construction like the United States of America would be useful for Europe, but I have no illusions that this will not come in the foreseeable future, because some countries like France, for example, do not like this idea of really having a political union. And here is the problem of Europe, you know. France asks for a lot of money. They want fiscal union, they want transfers, helping their clients in Southern Europe, but they do not want to go the full step towards a political union, and that is a fundamental problem for Europe.
So why do you think the EU can't work the way it is today? Why does it need to be more integrated?
Well, it doesn't work well. Well, if we want to go to a fiscal union, I would say what we need first is a political union. Because if you look at Switzerland, if you look at the United States, it all began as a political union and the fiscal things came thereafter. You can't just have a fiscal union with transfers and common printing press and so on.
Well, why not?
When you don't have a political union,
why
that
not?
is the
Because
fundamental difficulty.
Okay, but why not?
Well, why not?
Isn't
Because,
it smarter to...
Why not? Because you misuse your rights.
In what way?
No, you misuse your rights. If you have the local printing press, you print the money which you need. The 6 crisis countries during the crisis have printed more than 1,000 billion euros in addition to what they normally need for internal circulation, money which they formerly had borrowed, which they would have liked to borrow in the market, but couldn't borrow at normal rates of interest. So they printed the money, and the central banks lent it out to the banks, and they to the private economy. These things are not really very good, and it shows a misfunctioning of the European system, in my opinion. Also, we have mutual reinsurances through the rescue programs, you know. These things are insurance contracts, but when you have an insurance contract, you need a contract. Or when you have insurance, you need the contract. You can't just pay out the money without having a binding mutual insurance contract, and that's a nation.
Okay, so first you propose political integration. What do you propose? A single parliament, a one-man, one-vote system? And if yes, then won't it marginalize countries with smaller populations and dilute their voices?
There would be a second chamber where each country has one representative. Like in America, say, or like in Germany, where you have the parliament and you have the Bundesrat, where each land has one representative.
Right, but the difference is, in America, people are born Americans, and then they are everything else from wherever they descend. In Europe, people are either born French or German or Italian or Portuguese and so on and so on. My question was, if we have that one single parliament, a one-man, one-vote system, wouldn't it actually dilute voices of smaller countries and marginalize them?
Well, small countries are small countries. What can I do about it? Each person in Europe should have the same right. There can't be inhabitants of smaller countries which have more rights than inhabitants of bigger countries. This is, I find, rather self-evident. This is the principle of democracy.
Okay, and you think a big country like Germany would voluntarily give up its independence in favor of a federal government?
Germans, in the end, yes. You know, we have this horrible history, and Germans feel, by and large, that the future can only be an integrated Europe, rather than having separate countries. But this feeling, admittedly, is not as strong in many other European countries.
You also mentioned a common army as a necessary step for uniting Europe. So will that be independent from NATO?
Yeah, well, NATO is a defense treaty. It has the United States, it has Canada, it has all the separate European countries. I don't see why this means that the European countries cannot unite. We are unable to really act. We are not able even to defend the borders. Frontex, which is a European activity to defend the borders, really does not function. So a state needs minimum prerequisites, and if we don't have that, let's stay where we are, then let's have the EU with separate countries as a free trade area and separate armies. Yes, this is a possibility, but I see the difficulty with the current state of the Union. The euro does not really function. So for the time being, therefore, I'm not in favor of really doing the whole step, because I'm in favor in the long term, but I don't see it as a near and realistic possibility. As a realistic possibility, I see more the flexibility of the euro as a breathing currency union. Then my argument is, if, however, we succeed in creating the full union, then we could have a euro like the dollar, without exit possibilities.
Now, the European Union, in the state that it is now, has signed an association agreement with Ukraine. Kiev insists its main goal is to totally integrate into the EU. Is that a goal shared by the bloc, in your opinion?
That I don't know. This is a highly political question, which I cannot answer reasonably. I know about the Russian interest in Ukraine, and I very much hope that this conflict can be overcome in a way which is mutually acceptable by Russia and by the European Union.
But do you think economically it can accept Ukraine as its member? Do you think it's in a state to accept new members like Ukraine? Forget about the political fuss. Forget about political conflict. Do you feel like Ukraine, the way things are looking in Ukraine right now, can become a member of the bloc? And can the bloc afford it economically?
For the time being, I think we have enough difficulties in keeping the old EU together rather than expanding it further. And expanding it in a way which conflicts with Russian interests, I find problematic. So let me say I'm very much in favor of improving the relationship to Russia in economic terms, because I think Russia is a very natural partner for Western Europe. That I find important. So I do not want to speculate about the membership of Ukraine in the EU, for which I'm really not competent.
But exactly, but I know you've said, I've heard you say no reasonable party can be in favor of the economic destabilization of Russia and a trade war, which is what we're seeing today. But with political stabilization in Ukraine, because things are getting okay now, is it time to put an end to the sanctions between Russia and the EU?
The sanctions were based on conditions. If these conditions are satisfied, yes, no sanctions anymore. Again, you are driving me into territory where I'm not an expert. I can only say that the trade relationships between Russia and Europe are important. That therefore it is important to quickly find a political agreement between Russia and the West and Ukraine, so that a new stable situation can be found, because this sort of trade restrictions and tensions and so on are ultimately a negative sum game. Everyone is losing this way. We have to come back to normal terms and settle this Ukraine question one way or another. And here I very much hope that the politicians will do a good job.
No, the Euro crisis and the standoff with Russia isn't actually on the top of Europe's challenges today. Refugee crisis really worsening steadily. Germany is attracting most refugees from Middle East, with a large number of them claiming political asylum. But are there really economic migrants? How are so many slipping through the German immigration authorities' hands how come?
Well, Germany has no borders, no physical borders anymore, and people just come, and then they register somewhere inside Germany. They go to the cities and register there. Also, many do not register at all. We speak about 300,000 people who may not have registered, but are inside the country. The whole process of immigration has come out of control.
But Germany actually offers massive economic benefits to migrants. A lot of European members aren't happy with that. Look at, for instance, Hungary. Some propose slashing that to help manage the flow of migrants. What do you think? Would that help, or does that go against the spirit of the EU?
That goes against the spirit of humanity. The German Supreme Court has declared that the subsistence minimum, the cultural subsistence minimum, not the physical one, should be given to anyone who legally resides in Germany. And this includes asylum seekers.
Professor Sinn, thank you very much for this wonderful interview. Wish you all the luck. We were talking to Professor Werner Sinn, leading German economist, president of IFO Institute for Economic Research, advisor to the German Economic Ministry. We're discussing the continuing Eurozone crisis and if it stands in the way of political integration of the EU. That's it for this edition of Sophie & Co. I'll see you next time.